Well, grace and peace and the Lord bless you, everybody. Go ahead, come on and hit the share button. If you are watching the replay, you'll want to fast forward a couple of minutes as we allow people to come in tonight. We are having another unmuzzled discussion, a healing discussion, one that I believe is going to bless you. And so go ahead and begin hitting the share button. And I really want to challenge you to invite as many pastors on tonight as you can. Got a great guest tonight that I promise you will be a blessing to your pastor and to your life, to your church, to your ministry. And so as you're coming in, if you are watching by way of YouTube, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button and turn the bell notification on so that you get notified when we go live. There will be some content that we will only share to our YouTube platform. And so you want to make sure you subscribe. We're going to wait about 60 seconds, get our numbers up, and then we're going to introduce our guest to you tonight. And as you come on, let me know that you're on. Grace and peace to you. Do me a favor again and hit the share button once you get in, once you get on. And again, let us know that you're on and that you are watching. There are a couple of other things I'm going to share with you tonight as well that we have been and are working on, not just for Safehouse, but also for those of you that have experienced various types of traumatic life experiences. And we've been working on some things that we're going to be providing to you as a tool to integrate those traumatic life experiences with the faith framework and equip you to really move forward in and through your life. Again, as you're coming on, hit the share button. There's 44 of you on right now. If you will go ahead and hit the share button as we wait about 30 more seconds for you to come on. And as a matter of fact, while we're waiting, I'm going to share with you just a clip from the Integrate podcast that we're preparing to launch online. And then once we come back on, we will bring our guest up and get into a great conversation. Born again people, saved people tend to have the unhealthiest relationship with the emotional side of us. The spirit is what makes you God aware. You are aware of God and you relate to God through your spirit man. It is through the soul that you are self-aware. You relate to yourself and what you're feeling and how you're experiencing it and what you're feeling about what you're feeling through the soul. So through the spirit, I'm God aware. Through the soul, I'm self-aware. And through the body, I'm world aware. Well, if trauma happens at two levels of being, of self, trauma happens in the soul and at the body. Trauma, one person gave a definition that trauma is an injury to one's ability to feel. So trauma, again, happens in the soul, which is how I feel myself, and in the body, which is how I relate to the outside world. Now, it is important that we honor all three aspects of our tripart being: spirit, soul, and body. Make sure you are subscribing to our YouTube channels. That information will be dropped down into the comments. Of course, if you have been following Safehouse Unmuzzled, you know that we have a very serious commitment to working in the space of advocacy for victims and survivors of gross clergy abuse and predatory clergy sexual misconduct within the church, and specifically within the African American church context, an area that I believe is underrepresented in the space of advocacy, and a sector of the church that has at minimum, at least, its fair share of a pervasive culture of abuse. And so as we begin doing this work, one of the social workers that is an ally of our organization introduced me online to our guest tonight some months back, and just watched some of her content. And she recently released a new book. And so we're going to be talking about that resource tonight. And so tonight we're happy to have Ashley Nicole Cook with us. Ashley, good to have you with us tonight.
Having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am excited as well. Thank you for your contribution to this space and to this work, and something that your life is dedicated to for a myriad of reasons, and we'll get into talking some about that tonight. Just tell us some about yourself and what it is that you do.
I'm currently residing in Dallas, Texas, and I am a student, and I'm actually studying psychology.
Okay.
The goal is to eventually, or to master's degree, maybe my doctorate, thank you, Lord, like in clinical psychology, because
Good.
I have a strong commitment to this work, just doing the research, not just providing the information and educating people. On the other end, I have a passion and a desire to help them heal and them put practical tools in place to be able to live a meaningful and healthy life. Currently focusing on that. And I've been doing this advocacy work. It'll be a month. And it's a privilege to be able to do this work with, because those who have the shared experience of being abused or of trauma, childhood trauma, don't often make it out, don't often recover. And so I am truly grateful to be able to do this work.
Wow. I want to encourage you to go all the way to the doctoral level. It's less than 6% of psychologists that are African American, and of course there are multiple cultural disparities within the discipline at large. Number one, and that are woven just into the tapestry of psychology, that a person from a culture that the discipline was not necessarily designed for is necessary to be able to heal our people and bring our people out. One of the things that I've been looking at, and that we as a organization, Safehouse, has been just constantly confronting and confronted with and by, is this culture of silence that seems to inculcate and surround, place a wall around this particular conversation. Because, of course, the church within the African American community as an institution has held such a sainted and sacred and protected position within the community, and of course has been to the Black community for many years the center of life, the center of hope, the center of healing, and for some time was our collective primary voice to the greater world. When we now begin to have conversations that bring out of the shadows and out of the darkness some of the abuses and harms and cultures that underpin and allow those abuses, we are met with great resistance, great denial, and a myriad of other things that I'm sure you have experienced yourself. So tell us about how you came to doing this work, and why it's a personal passion for you, and then some of the resistance and perhaps personal experience that you had and have had with having this conversation within the church.
Yeah, so meaningful to me because, as I mentioned earlier, I am a survivor of sexual abuse and abuse that took place within my family. Was adopted into a family where the parents were, my father was, and so I grew up in the church world. I grew up going to the week, like I was that PK where you had to be at church every time the doors were open. In Christ was presented to me by the same man that would go on in age 12 to 19 years old. So having to navigate through abuse was challenging for a teenager. It's challenging for an adult to try to understand why someone who is supposed to protect you and love you, and can someone who also understands scripture, also Christ's position on abusing your children, would still do it. And so I had to navigate through, and I left home at 19 years old. I actually did not deal with the abuse any longer, and I also did not have the courage to be able to confront my abuser at that time. And there was a stipulation also that took place with the grooming and with the abuse, that was to even name my abuser for 10 years. And so I went to navigate through my trauma. And then at the age of 29, I closed it publicly. And I shared that I had experienced sexual abuse at the hands of someone that I loved and cared about. I never named my abuser. I didn't insist, because I kind of knew already that it would not be received well. I would be ridiculed. I would be the black sheep of the family. I just knew it would not be received well. And so my overall goal was to let others know, have an awful experience, and you can heal from that awful experience and go on to live. It does not have to define who you are. It can shape who you are, but it doesn't have to define. So I've been committed to doing this work since 20 to disclose. And when I did disclose, a few days after, my adoptive father was found dead in his home due to to the chest. And it's documented as an accident, and we'll leave it at that. And that was something that I now had to, I disclose an abusive experience without insinuating him. And now all of a sudden, he's no longer here. He's no longer here to deal with the backlash. So I was the only one that was. So I lost a lot of my family. About 98% of my family disowned me, including my mother, including my brothers. And it'll be 7 years at the end of next month. And I still have not had any conversations with my mother or my brother. How deep it goes. And so when I say that I'm committed to this work, because I don't think that people realize how to not only do the work, but the challenges that come with the relationships that you have with some people. And that was something that I was not prepared to do, this thing. And I'm learning that there are more people that need to hear this message. Intentions of slowing down or stopping. And if people choose to, walk away, it's their choice. I'm committed to this work.
Wow, wow, amazing, amazing, and disheartening at the same time. Those of you that are coming on, hit the share button for us. So you disclose your abuse and don't initially name the abuser, and then you've now got to navigate that at multiple levels. Number one, no opportunity to confront your abuser, no opportunity for the abuser to acknowledge the abuse, and then there's this whole conversation surrounding what forgiveness looks like, and walking through
Yeah.
That process in the absence of how did the church respond to you disclosing this?
Yeah. So for the most part, it was not a friendly exchange. Really, those who were familiar with my father's ministry. A lot of people don't realize, and one thing you'll never see me do is name him. And I was very intentional about was changing my last name so that it would not to try to identify who it is. And so he was a man and his leadership and his influence spread very far. And so those ministry, those who had some sort of positive experience with his leadership, they had a challenging time trying to reconcile does good things can also do evil things.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were people who me privately, there were people that, slid in my DM and said, I would never be there for me publicly. Then there were those who approached General at services and told me it's my fault that he's dead. I should have kept my mouth closed. What goes on in your home should have stayed. And I even had people try to over spiritualize it. Well, would Jesus have? How would I? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I know that was a key part to me healing. And the way I believed it was honorable. I believed because as you said, you try to reconcile. You try to reconcile. How do you honor a parent who has done
Right.
dishonorable? And so in me trying to still honor and still give the legacy of the good, because there were attempts to give their life to Christ because they encountered his ministry. I can't discount that away. That counts for something. So me trying to piece it all together and figure out the best share this information, it was very hard, and it was not received well by and even now, 7 years later, it is still a struggle. People more receptive now because now they're realizing that, oh, it hits home. My daughter or my son experienced this, or my grandmother experienced this, and we're just now. So once it hits close to home, then people want to start talking about it. So at the beginning, I still have I'm still tussling with some church folk now. Okay, we can tussle as long as you'll listen. It's okay. We can tussle.
Wow. Well, thank you for your commitment to the work through these adversities and the resistance that seems to just be inextricably connected to this conversation. Now, you said, and let me know if you don't want to answer any question I ask. You said
Oh, yeah.
that you changed your last name and you were deliberate to not name him in the work, or why is that?
So I had no problem naming naming him. And that was during a year I was extremely broken. I was extremely hurt. That I was probably never going to have thought I was going to have it. And so at that point, I really didn't care. I didn't care what people had to say. I kind of had like this, the heck with everything at this point. I'm going to name who did what, who did what when they did it. And I wanted my revenge. I want to know what happened to me, because sometimes it's easier to be the victim than actually do the work to heal. And so I was in that space where I just didn't care and to heal as I began to not just heal on the couch, begin to do the work with the Lord as well, and really eat the word and really, Ashley, the way that you are going about it may not be the godliest approach. What are you bringing people to Christ, or are you making people feel sorry for you? You know, and so my approach. And so once healing started to take place, I reevaluated my approach. People can get the things that they need to get from my experience, and without having to know who did it, without having to know the name of the person, title, the influence that they had. But most of the time, when you give a name to someone, church people, they will go and try to dig and dig and dig and just try to do research experience. So I was intentional because I didn't want my messaging. I didn't want the healing component of my experience to be diluted. I didn't want it to be missed. I wanted to make sure that people got a send.
Wow. A few things that you said. I see some of the comments. Demetrius said her mic is cutting out. You all let me know if you all can hear her okay. There are 126 of you all on. Let me know if you all can hear her okay as she's talking. One of the things that the Black community, and by virtue then the sub community, the Black church, has adopted as almost a conviction we are to hold and to uphold, is this responsibility to protect the image of the family's name, the church. And part of that, okay, they're saying your mic is going in and out, Ashley. We'll see the next time if y'all can hear okay. Part of that, I believe, is a result of what Dr. Joy Crew talks about, post-traumatic slave syndrome, where in order to prevent a fellow slave from experiencing the most extreme form of the master's discipline, if a fellow Black person, slave or enslaved person, had done something, the other enslaved persons would protect that person so that they did not get killed. And so now here we are, generations and centuries removed, and within our community, the Black community, and then in the Black church, there are abusers and predators and violators that we are fully aware of. The family is aware of what Uncle Johnny is doing, and what the family does is just try to keep your little girls away from him. Never mind the little boys, just keep the little girls away. Don't let the little girls sit on Uncle Johnny's lap. And that is the extent of accountability or response to it. In the church, we have these predators who the church, the Black church, charismatic church in particular, those of us that are given to the gifts of the Spirit and the expressions of the gifts of the Spirit and the charisma that comes along with that, especially when we have gifted, highly seemingly anointed. I'm wrestling theologically at present, even in some of my writings, with if it's possible to be anointed and a predator. I don't know yet. I'm still working through it. I'll let y'all know what I come to. But we will know these things within our community, and we will, in order to protect the broader image of the church, we will then protect this perpetrator, which then comes at the expense of violating and re-traumatizing the victim. You cannot protect the predator and the victim simultaneously. The same institution, the same groups of people cannot protect the one who has done the harm unjustly and the one who has been harmed, because in doing so, some of what you've experienced and what you shared tonight, Ashley, is what I would call institutional abuse. It is the embodiment of how I would use the term church hurt. Now, prior to these conversations, I didn't church hurt the way it was used. I couldn't get with it. But whenever a person has been abused, and then you tell it, and the church deals with you with this polarity, then now the church has contributed to your abuse and to your harm and to your violation. If you're coming on, we're talking with Ashley Nicole Cook. She's got a new book we're going to be talking about tonight, and we're going to share with you how you can get it. Hit the share button. Those of you that are watching on Facebook, do that right now. And those of you that are on YouTube, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I asked Ashley, neither having an opinion one way or the other about why you made the decision to adjust the way that you tell your experience. Something that I often say is when you're healed, you tell the story differently. It's not that you don't tell the story, but you tell it differently. And now, are you presently, though, as you've been forging with this work, are you finding men and women of God who are not privately, but openly beginning to embrace and support and give even platform to the work you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned before, people are having the conversation, and unfortunately, they're open to it. It hits close to home. Either there's a relative that is experiencing it or has experienced it, a new situation that has been brought to their attention at the local church. And that's when people want to bring me in. It's after the day, and so the prevention piece is what I'm struggling with. The recovery talk than I do prevention, because that's normally when people have to walk you through what that recovery process looks like. So they're
saying you're still going in and out on your mic, Ashley.
Okay.
Still going in and out. LaQuisha said, I agree, but I understand Ashley's decision because the story is about her healing and not her predator. Good perspective. Is my mic going in and out, or can you all hear me okay? Let's see if it's a platform issue, because we want to make sure you all are hearing the conversation. Those of you that are coming on, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that share button and hit a thumbs up. I'm fine. Okay. So you said the prevention piece is where you're really trying to get some. So let's talk some about prevention and looking at some of the cultures that are part and parcel to causing, or at least giving way to, not only to the abuses, but to this now becoming a pervasive, widespread issue? What are some of the cultures that you have identified in your work and in some of your research that tends to give way or to allow or to be more prone to these abuses happening and then going unaddressed? Yeah, you're muted now. It's not on. It's not on our end, no. Can you hear me? Yeah, no, I've got you unmuted. Hmm. Let me be Pentecostal charismatic for a minute. Saints, go to pray in this warfare. On the line, the devil is fighting. Can't hear you at all. Maybe Ashley, try to go out. Maybe if it won't work, and then come back on. As she's doing that, we're talking with Ashley Nicole Cook. She's written a powerful new book. It's a resource book entitled Healing the Flock, and I'm going to share with you in a bit on how you can get it. You still muted? Now look at this devil.
Can you hear me?
There you go.
Okay.
Come on, saints, lift your hands and give God praise.
Hallelujah.
So what are some of the things that are well, number one, what are some of the cultures that underpin these environments of abuse? And then number two, what are some of the preventative measures that can be taken? Did I lose you? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Now it looks like, can you all hear me? It looks like she can't hear me. Okay, she's coming back in. So as she's coming back in, I'm going to give you all some of the ways, some of the causes of why these abuses seem to be becoming more frequent and more pervasive. Number one, when you fail, and when I say you, I don't just mean you as an individual, but I do also mean you as an individual. I mean us collectively as a people, Black people, number one. Number two, us collectively as a church global, number two. And then number three, you individually. When you fail to respond, to address these abuses, silence only assists the abuse and the abuser. Silence only assists the abuser. Everybody type that in the comments for me. Silence only assists the abuser and the abuse. One of the teachings, one of the primary messages that is not a teaching at all, but is really mass grooming, mass conditioning, where we have been conditioned across the pulpit to respond to abuse with an attitude of apathy. One of the teachings is, number one, just pray about it. And what happens when you are conditioned to believe that your primary assignment in the face of overt abuse, in particular abuse of power within the church, that your primary response, that your most powerful position is in prayer, what is gradually happening is you are being morally disengaged. And moral disengagement is a gradual moving away, a gradual declining away from self-sanction, where you are no longer conscious to, you are no longer conscious of, you are no longer present to the gross nature. And when I use the word gross here, I don't mean it in the way that we colloquially use it. I mean the very weighty, the very overt, the very obvious perverseness of such an environment, number one, and then of such an ideology. Just pray about it. One of the things Ashley said as we're waiting on her to come back in, that people would ask her as a way to try to silence her, to try to shame her into silence, is, what would Jesus do? Well, we can see very clearly what Jesus would not do by looking at what Jesus did, in responses to the abuses of power that he was faced with in his ministry on the earth. What did Jesus do when an environment in which the social convention of the day placed women as possessions and lower on the totem pole, when that environment got your back? All right, and it sounds like I can hear you too. When that environment brought the woman caught in adultery out before everyone, and the man was not brought, what did Jesus do? He used his influence, he used his power to level the playing field where there was an obvious abuse that was woven into the tapestry of the social convention and the culture. What did Jesus do in Matthew chapter number 23, when the religious leaders, the Pharisees, were using their power to psychologically shut people out of the kingdom of heaven? Jesus said, he said, you shut the doors of the kingdom of heaven to these people, but you yourselves will not go in. What did he do? He stepped up. He leveraged his social capital. He leveraged his voice, his platform, his influence to come to the defense and the support of those who had been violated. What would Jesus do? I can tell you what he would not do. He would not sit in silence in the face of abuse. So Ashley, before we lost you, we were going to talk about what are some of the cultures you've identified in your work that underpin and support these environments of abuse, and then what are some of the preventative measures?
Yeah, so and let me know if you all can hear me. One of the things you mentioned earlier when we were talking about slavery and some of the experiences of the women, not just the ones that were raped, not just the ones that were abused. Of course, we know that there were men who were sexually abused as well. And as quiet as kept, that's according to a book that I was reading, Rethinking Rufus. It really unpacks the sexual trauma and sexual violation of enslaved men. Mm-hmm. And it reports that men tend to, during that time, were raped and violated more often than women. And so when it comes to women, when their daughters were getting raped, when their children were getting raped, they told them to just be quiet. Don't say anything, because if you say something, they'll kill you, they'll punish you, they'll separate us. And so what was survival at that moment has been passed down generations to generations. And of course, we know it as sweeping it under the rug, or what goes on in our house stays in our house. It's that mentality that's been passed down from generation to generation, whereas we may be physically emancipated, we're not mentally. And our mothers, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers who experienced the same trauma only knew to be quiet. So that is one of the existing barriers that we still have to unpack and help families overcome. When I have conversations with our older Black women, and when I say older, I mean 65 and up, who experience sexual abuse, they're extremely uncomfortable with it, about talking about it, because they've never really talked about it. They've just lived in silence. And so at 65, they're just now having the hard conversation and having to tussle with the fact that they were in fact sexually abused, not by a stranger, not by a coworker, or not just by not just sexual harassment, but you were sexually abused by maybe your father, by your uncle, by an aunt, because there is abuse that comes from women, sexual abuse that comes from women. They are perpetrators and predators as well. One of the another barrier that exists is it is considered like a badge of honor when a black boy has sex with an older or an adult woman. It's a badge of honor, like, son, you did that, congratulations. But if it is a female victim, we acknowledge it as sexual abuse, as molestation. So there are several barriers that exist, and the unfortunate part about it, about all of it, is we're the ones that are keeping the cycle.
Yeah.
We're the ones that are continuing to perpetuate that cycle. As you mentioned earlier, silence is the vehicle that transports the cycle.
Yeah. That's
It,
good. Y'all type that in the comments. Silence is the vehicle that transports the cycle. I'm going to steal that.
go for it.
But I'm telling you I'm stealing this. It's not technically stealing. That's good. Y'all type that in the comments. Go ahead.
Yeah, so those are three things. And what I've also learned is that when it comes to the African American community, there are a lot of similarities to our Hispanic and our Latinx community as well. There are more things that are similar than different in our culture, in our cultures. And so in Black and Brown families, in your Latin American or your Latino or Latinx families, they're very close knit. There are multiple people that usually live in a home together. It is multi-generational that normally live together. And so there is a tight-knit family dynamic that's there. Whereas if abuse happens in that tight-knit situation, you can't say anything. Like, you can't report if it's the breadwinner of the family. You can't say anything, because how are we going to survive
Wow.
without his contribution? So you can't say anything. And one thing that I have learned in working with a lot of my Hispanic brothers and sisters in this work is that it is very difficult to acknowledge that it's very difficult for them to acknowledge that they've been sexually abused as well, because it's just as much of a hush hush taboo conversation in their culture as it is in ours.
Wow. Wow. And if we're really going to do the work to unpack these uh, again, these cultures that melanated people find both to be our defense as well as our downfall. We're going to have to look into some of the societal inequities in order to really understand what makes these particular types of trauma so traumatic. One of the things that I often say about most and much of the church is that we are trauma uninformed. And because generations gone by responded to these traumas in silence, and that silence then became synonymous with strength, now generations that don't have this conviction to be quiet
Yeah.
are then being met with again a type of victim shaming that suggests that in some way having these conversations or disclosing is weakness and is unchristlike and is ungodly and is not what God would have us to do. I talk frequently about the moral disengagement that happens that allows these types of issues to become so pervasive. And of the 8 mechanisms of moral disengagement, the most dangerous, I think, the most powerful, I think, is moral justification, where we will justify or use and identify worthy ends to sanctify the destructive behavior that silence of the community, of the church in response to these things is. Voltaire said, if you can get people to believe absurdities, you can get them to commit atrocities. And so the absurdities, i.e., God wants you to sit quietly with this, or it was the will of God that you go through what you went through to make you into who God wanted you to be. That was God's. You got to carry your cross like Jesus carried his cross. Those types of absurdities then create and equip cultures within the church that support and perpetrate further atrocities. What are some of the other, Ashley, some of the other, again, ideas and teachings that don't prevent, but rather support and create these environments that encourage apathy and silence in response to sexual abuse in the Black church?
Yeah, I'll do you one better. When it comes to a lot of our, you mentioned it earlier that our generation, the millennials, and those that are younger, this new group of people that have come, they are not afraid to say, we're not
Mhm.
afraid to say, this isn't right. I need therapy or I need healing. I need to confront my trauma. We're not scared of that.
Mhm.
What we run into is the first place that we go to, as you mentioned at the very beginning of this, was the church is a safe haven. You
Mhm.
know, if we trust our leadership, that's the first place that we're normally going to go when we
Right.
have a life crisis. We go to our pastor or a minister. Well,
Right.
what do you do when you go to a pastor or a minister who is not equipped to deal with this sort of issue or confront this sort of issue? So instead of
Mhm.
that pastor saying, hey, I don't have the education, I don't have the um I'm not equipped with the tools to be able to help you navigate through this. Instead of saying that, that's when you get into that conversation. Well, maybe God wanted you to experience this to help you
Mhm.
grow, or maybe He wanted to use this to teach you a lesson. Or and I don't believe that God uses sexual abuse to teach anyone a lesson. I don't believe that He uses sexual abuse to make anyone stronger. I don't think that He needs abuse to allow anyone to walk in their purpose. But you have pastors and preachers who look up to their mentors and look up to their spiritual fathers and their spiritual coverings. And unfortunately, their spiritual coverings or their fathers did not teach them how to deal with this because they never had to.
Right.
So the church of, my grandfather and my father is much different than the church now. And
Mhm.
so you have pastors who oftentimes they don't, I think that they mean well, but they have not been taught how to communicate that they don't know everything, that
Right.
they cannot walk you through this process. And so that is a huge barrier when it comes to victims or survivors ready to do this work. They go to leadership and leadership drops the ball.
Yeah. Yeah. And even in instances, I'm gonna go a step further, where leadership is perhaps trained, I mean, senior leadership, educated for the work. One of the cultures within the church, within the African American charismatic church context, that is anti-prevention, that creates an aggregate for these abuses to be built upon, is the duplicity and multiplicity of roles, which allows for a conflict of interest whereby abuse is always built when there's a power differential on conflict of interest. When you have the primary teaching authority, who is also the primary disciplinarian, who is also the counselor in the church. Well, those multiplicities of roles are a conflict of interest. Our challenge, though, is again, we have woven into the tapestry of African American charismatic Christianity these egos that need to be the HNIC in every area of ministry. So
Yeah.
no, if the member comes to me and says, well, hey, I need this, of course, I got to be able to respond to that because I'm the man of God and I don't need you looking to nobody else for anything else.
Ooh.
And that very thing is one of the cultures that allows these abuses. What's some of the research? I know this is a resource book, the book that you've written, Healing the Flock, the prevention and healing of sexual abuse within Black churches. What are some of the things that you researched in this resource book?
Yeah, so I conducted a survey with a lot with pastors and preachers who either identify as African American or they are leading a predominantly African American congregation. And I asked 5 simple questions. And those questions were, if someone reported or disclosed that they had been sexually abused, how would you respond? And then, do you have youth or young adults in your ministry? If so, are your leaders and your volunteers trained in sexual abuse prevention, like evidence-based sexual abuse prevention, not some program that somebody just put together, but evidence-based, meaning that there is statistics, there is scientific research that is teaching you what to look for, how to navigate through prevention. So yeah, not just some random program. So if you do have young adults or youth in your ministry, have their leaders not only taken sexual abuse prevention training, but have you done federal background checks on them as well? If so, I'm sorry, not if so, but have you also gotten letters of recommendation? Have you spoke to prior leadership to find out why they are no longer at the location that they were at before? Have you done your due diligence to vet this person that you have allowed to be with your youth? If a victim of sexual abuse comes to you, how would you respond? Like, I asked for their response. And to my surprise, what I received was disheartening from those that said that I don't know. Like, I'm glad that they said I don't know. The ones that responded, some of their responses were extremely heartbreaking, to the point where they said I would just pray for them and send them on their way. I would try to find a mother in the church to partner them with. I would continue to ask follow-up questions to make sure that they were in fact abused. Like, they would interrogate the victim.
Wow.
And so it was extremely disheartening. So on top of doing the survey, I utilized 6 resources by a well-known psychologist, Diane Landberg. And she has been doing this particular work in the advocacy space, in the faith-based advocacy space for well over 30 years. And so I use a lot of her research because her research is data driven. And unfortunately, there is not a lot of information that has been made available to us regarding Black clergy, regarding what takes place in our community, because again, we're just now starting to have these conversations. So a lot of what I had to piece together was data that included our history, data that included those cycles of abuse, as well as filtering in data from a clinical psychologist. So the goal is to, I know that we were talking about it earlier, and it's something that you're looking into as well, is there has to be money available to actually do these studies, because oftentimes we're not included in those research studies. You know, we're included, but it's not about us. And so we have to start funding our own research and doing our own research studies to get the appropriate data to be able to report.
Wow. Wow. If you're coming on, those of you that are on right now, pinned down at the bottom of the screen is a link to Ashley's website, www.faithtoconfront.com. I want to encourage everybody to go and order a copy of her new book and order a copy for your pastor. All right. I want to challenge everybody to do that tonight. Order a copy of this book and order a copy for your pastor. This is an area of work that, as Ashley just said, we don't have a whole lot of resources for us, a whole lot of data and information. Clinical psychologists, though, are looking to you to do the work. As a matter of fact, as I was talking to a couple of different clinical psychologists just about this work, they asked me, had I heard of you? Had I heard of the work that you're doing?
Oh my
And
goodness,
so,
I'm honored.
right, they are looking to you, and again, we appreciate the work that you are doing in the advocacy space. I was saying the other day as I was looking at some of Dr. Langberg's videos online from a recent conference that again some of the cultural undertrappings and underpinnings that make our religious community in the Black community what it is so diversely distinct from any other environments, and the trauma that ensues and that is a result of the abuses that are experienced within those environments are also then distinct and are different. Cultural betrayal trauma is a distinct type of trauma, and all traumas impact the self multidimensionally. But where there is an intracultural trauma, in other words, where a trauma is perpetrated within a particular cultural community by another member of the cultural community upon another person within that cultural community, the within group nature of that type of trauma impacts the person who is violated beyond at a spiritual level and beyond just at a physical and physiological level. It affects the mental health of that person to a degree that extra cultural betrayal trauma or trauma that happens from outside of the community would not have the impact. And why is that? Because woven into the tapestry of the African American cultural experience is the expectation of trust, safety, solidarity, support, security. Woven deeper than into the African American Christian cultural tapestry is again that same solidarity now at a spiritual level, where God now is entrusted as the safekeeper of that safety and of that trust and of that solidarity and of that security. And so where there is a violation of those trusts and expectations that happens within those communities, the traumatic response is deep and it is far reaching, and we need more research to look into it so that we can really see healing. How do we, Ashley, as we're coming towards an end, begin to bring healing into the conversation? And number two, what are some of the ways that the church collective and then individuals that are watching can contribute to the healing response to sexual abuse within the Black church?
The first thing is to know the facts, to come to grips with the fact that this is actually something that is happening, and it's happening more often than we're probably aware of. We know that it's happening more than it is reported. So come to grips with the fact that this is indeed happening, and then find out what you can do. Find out what your local body, the church that you trust, the church that you attend every single Sunday, find out what they are doing. Does this issue matter to them? Is there a safe place for victims to come at your local body? If not, begin to figure out what you can do to form some sort of support system in your church. Because what happens is when a victim discloses to the pastor, what should happen is that church should now become a safe place and a safe community for that survivor or that victim. They should rally in support of that victim. And so so find out what's happening at your local body. Get certified as a child sexual abuse prevention facilitator. There are programs that teach you evidence-based research, teach you how to facilitate this training in your community. They will go, it's an 8-hour class. I always suggest Darkness to Light. I served as the director of partnership there for 2 years, and Darkness to Light has a evidence-based training called Stewards of Children. And I encourage every adult to take that training. But if you want to take it a step further, get certified to teach others. Like, use your voice. And it only requires your time. That's all it requires for you to bring other people into an awareness of what they can do to prevent sexual abuse. And I can't, what was the second part of your question?
No, Ashley, I don't remember.
I'm sorry.
I'm caught up in the answer. What did I say? How can, again, the individual and then the church as an institution begin to bring healing, to this issue of sexual abuse?
Yes. So again, creating that community for survivors. And one of the things that you said earlier about pastors serving in multiple roles, and with the whole HNIC, and of course we all know that N stands for nincompoop. So everyone's in charge. What I always encourage every local body is to partner with other bodies in your community, other churches in your community. If you don't have the resources in place to support a new ministry, such as a sexual abuse prevention support group, or if you don't have whatever you're lacking, there is someone in your community that has it. And so partnership is key. We like to own our own stuff, and I don't know why we're so afraid to partner with other people. Ain't nobody trying to steal your members, man of God, woman of God. This is about partnering to help those that you are responsible for shepherding, and those you're responsible for covering. So reach out to your local community and find out what they already have in place, and say, and build a rapport with that community, and say, you know what, hey, Pastor John, hey, Pastor Susan, this is such and such over at whatever the church is. I have a member here who has just disclosed that he or she has gone through X, Y, and Z. We don't have the tools in place to be able to help them. But we know that you offer a support group every Tuesday. Can we entrust her or him to you every Tuesday? And it's a introduction. You then take the survivor or the victim, you introduce them to the ministry, and it's not so much a gentle handoff as much as it is, hey, this is some additional help. I'm here to help you walk through this path as much as I can, but I'm limited in what I know. And so, but I want to get you the help that you need. So partnership is absolutely key. And one of the things, excuse me, that I want to mention concerning the book is when it says a resource guide or a resource book, it is actually that. It has a glossary of 150 terms in it. It has local and national resources. It gives you the citation number, the laws for being a mandated reporter. It tells you who to report to, what the laws are concerning those that make a report. And there is, after they do the investigation and nothing is found to be true, you are not, you don't have to worry about going to jail. It has to be a good faith report, and so it just gives you all the information that you need to be able to make good decisions when someone discloses to you. And so it is a true resource book helping point you in the right direction.
Wow. Amazing. Listen, if you haven't already, the link is at the bottom of the screen, faith2confront.com. You need to go get a copy of the book, buy a copy of the book for a pastor that you know, and give it to them. Begin the equipping process. And I'm going to go a step further and say, if you're in a church that is not interested in these issues and won't allow you to create community for these issues, leave that church. All right, I said it. Don't put it on the guest. Leave that church. Come out of it. If they are not concerned about the safety and healing of God's people, what are we doing? What are we doing? If Jesus says in Matthew 23 and 23 to the Pharisees, he said, you all have taught or preached tithing of anise and cumin and mint, but you have forsaken the weightier matters of justice and mercy and truth and faith. Those things must be our priorities in the various ways that they show up, and we gotta we gotta normalize having these conversations. Ashley, thank you for sharing your time with us tonight. Give us any final thoughts. Let folks know where they can find you on social media. Again, the link for her book is pinned down at the bottom. If you don't go and get that book, I'm afraid they lock you out of Amazon for 2.5 weeks. Go and order a copy of the book right now. Let's support one of our own out of our community. Let's support the resource. Give us some final thoughts, Ashley.
Yes. So, number one, thank you for having me. I am always grateful to have this conversation. Always grateful to continue to share with others ways that we can prevent and support those who are going through sexual abuse or have experienced it. Final thoughts is, oh my goodness, haven't had to do final thoughts in a while. Just do what you can to prevent this from happening. Get the training that you need. Support those in your family that have experienced this trauma. If there is someone that has disclosed to you within your family and you have done them wrong and you have kind of made them the black sheep of the family, have a conversation with them. Make some amends, make some apologies, have some tough conversations with the older family members who experienced this trauma but maybe didn't do right by you when you disclose your experience. Have those hard conversations. If forgiveness is what needs to take place, ask the Lord to work on your heart concerning that as well. But do what you can to prevent this from happening by getting educated, and do what you can to support those that have gone through it.
Excellent. Excellent. Her name is there on the screen, Ashley Nicole Cook, on Facebook and on Instagram. Be sure to go and follow her there. Get a copy of her resource book at faithtoconfront.com. On this Thursday night, everybody join us on Clubhouse. We're going to be having a conversation with one of the survivors of one of the cases we're presently handling. And she's going to be sharing some of her experience with us. 8:15 Central Standard Time on Thursday night on Clubhouse. Thank you again, Ashley, for joining us tonight. And we're praying for you and with you and the work that is in your hand. Okay, and she just shared all of her social media handles there at the bottom. Just pinned it there. You all go and follow her on social media and get the book. And we will see everybody real soon. Thanks again, Ashley.
Thank you.